My name is Joanne Harrold, and I'm 72 years old, or 72 years young, and I've been dancing since I was 3 years old. So I'd say I've been dancing forever.
Fine. You will tell us a little bit from your experience with dances, especially West Coast Swing, and we have a lot of questions. So, how did you start West Coast Swing? Can you talk?
It was a very significant event in my life. I was a very young teenager, and my girlfriend was older than me, and she was dating an older person than her. And we all liked to dance. She knew I always danced, so she invited me to go dancing with her and her boyfriend one time. So I said, sure, of course, I always want to go dance. So I went with them, and he asked me to dance. And of course I said yes. And he put me in this move. And I said, I don't know what you did. What was it? I loved it. Do it again. And he said it was a whip. And I said, what is a whip? It was a totally different movement than I had ever experienced. And he said, it's called West Coast Swing. This is a whip, one of the basic 8-count move. And I said, oh, this is fabulous. I have to learn how to do this. So he taught me. His name was Jack Hayes. He is in his 90s. I was at his birthday party last year, which was in late September, I believe. And we had a big party for him at the LA Swing Dance Club, which is the oldest West Coast Swing Dance Club in the world. Mm-hmm. And it was a dancing birthday party, and all the women lined up and danced with him. Mm-hmm. I was the first, because he was my first partner, first person that ever put me in a whip and told me the words West Coast Swing. And that was 1961.
Okay, a long time.
A long time ago.
What did happen in between?
The music, I believe, more than anything has affected the dance. In the 40s, the movies showed a swing dancing, and everyone wanted to do that. And sometimes they called it jitterbug, they just called it different names. But it was dancing to the music, and it was free feeling, and it was during the war, and the big bands were playing the music. Then, in the 50s, the music changed. The big bands died out, and rock and roll came in. And rock and roll music appealed to the kids, and the kids wanted to dance differently than their parents had. Mm-hmm. So they got into rock and roll, which was basically an East Coast swing type movement. Mm-hmm. And then the music changed in the 60s. Mm-hmm. 60s is when Chubby Checker came out with the twist. Mm-hmm. And that killed partner dancing. The little combos that used to play in all the clubs, and you could go dancing anywhere, anytime, died out. Mm-hmm. Now the bar owners didn't have to pay for live musicians. They could just play records, and the people would dance to the records. They didn't have to take dance lessons. They didn't have to know dance. They'd just stand there and just kind of move around to the music. So the 60s was a bad time for couple dancing. Mm-hmm. So for me to be shown that there is another dance, West Coast Swing, that is a couple dance, was exciting. Mm-hmm. But the West Coast Swing at that time was being performed in small places, little clubs. They had little contests. You'd win $5, $10. they would go around to different places in Orange County, and there was one couple that kept West Coast Swing alive during that time, and that's when it was formulating, and it was Marge Peters and her husband, and they would get these contests going. And the very first West Coast Swing contest that I did was with Jack Hayes.
Okay.
I had no idea what I was doing. It was not planned, but his girlfriend didn't want to do it with him, so he said, "Come on, Joanne, let's dance." And I said, "Okay." You know. So off I went, off on the floor, and we danced, had a good time, which is rule number one, have a good time, and we won second place, $5.
Okay, good. So, what did change until today's contest or?
Well, let me take you up through the 60s. In the late 60s, this is what I was told, because I was not part of the forming of the Los Angeles West Coast Swing Club. But in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in that time period, I'm not sure, a group of people spearheaded by Dean Collins, who was a major background dancer in a lot of movies, had a very distinctive style. His girls were always upright, but he was in the Savoy style. And so they decided to form the Los Angeles West Coast Swing Dance Club. And they did. And they started having dances every week. And not only did they have West Coast Swing dancing, but they also had Balboa dancing. So the Balboa dancing was kept alive by them, as well as starting this West Coast Swing dance that was going on. And that went on through the 70s. All the way up to the 80s, West Coast Swing was more a small dance, Southern California, nightclubs, nothing big, nothing national, just a small community of Hollywood dancers type style. And then in the early 80s, things changed radically. Marianne Bridges and Jack Bridges decided to have a big competition, and they started the U.S. Open, and it changed West Coast Swing. West Coast Swing in the 60s and 70s, when I saw it, when I tried to dance it, was kept from the waist up, no movement, very smooth. From the waist down, very active, very active. But in the 80s, things changed. The first, I believe it was 1984, the first U.S. Open that Lance Sherman and Marianne Nunez won, the U.S. Open. They immediately became superstars of West Coast Swing. And it just changed the way so many people were looking at it. But again, the music was changing, the attitudes were changing. It went from a social dance to a performance dance. And a social dance is very different than a performance dance. And Lance and Marianne Nunez were perfect people for everyone to look up to and want to be like them, dance like them, and perform like them. And the dance spread across the United States like wildfire. People from California went to other states, took it to other states. Other states contacted people in California, had them come out there to teach them, and the dance just went crazy. And then again in the 90s, the music changed, and the style started changing again. And then in 2000s, the music changed, and the style has changed. So the style of the dance has changed, I believe, because the music has changed, because the youth has kept the dance alive by developing their movements to the particular music that's being played. And I look at the current top competitors in West Coast Swing, and it's a young people's dance. It's great. The music fits their movements. It's youthful, it's energetic, it's entertaining, it has a very sensual quality about it. So we are very lucky to have had so many different styles of West Coast Swing. But West Coast Swing, the beauty of that, in my opinion, is lead follow. Man leads, lady follows. Lady doesn't have to know the patterns or anything. She only has to know how to follow the man. I mean, he's going to lead her into a walk or a triple, basically, right? You start, you finish, and there's something in between called a walk or a triple. So you could dance with someone that you've never met, never danced with, and you look like you've been dancing together for years. But I think of all the dances, it's probably the hardest dance to learn, for the man especially, because he's responsible for so much. But we're lucky to have a dance like that. So whoever invented it, whoever contributed to it, thank goodness.
What did change in the area of the social dancing in West Coast Swing?
Social dancing? I believe that some people forget that there is a thing called social dancing and there is a thing called competition dancing, and they are different. There are things that you should do on the social floor, and there are things that you should do on the competition floor. And what I see now, I see a lot more people on the social floor trying to perform what belongs on the competition floor. And that might be fine for your ego. It might be fine for some of the people who are patrons and watching. But sometimes it's dangerous and people get hurt because they don't watch where other people are. And also, I believe it's inconsiderate of other dancers if you take up so much of the floor and don't share it with everyone.
Okay. Where are the places to go for dancing? Earlier and today?
In the 60s, the first time I ever went to a place where they had West Coast Swing dancing was a place called Hankenstans. And it was in Southern California. And I was in awe of the dancing that I saw. Oh my goodness. It was like I'd gone to heaven and all of these wonderful dancers are out there and I'm just staring and watching. Because it was like everyone on the floor was a fabulous dancer. It was lead follow. So no matter who they danced with, the person could dance. And they were there because they wanted to do West Coast Swing. That's what they were doing. And so, as I'm saying, it was Hankenstans. And then later There were places like the Staircase and quite a few other places. I know there were a lot of little nightclubs around Orange County. I can't even remember some of their names. But the couple that I was hearing about in 1961, when I was talking about these fabulous dancers that I'm seeing, was a couple called Pat and Darlene. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they were considered by everyone to be the best West Coast swing dancers that there was. When there was a contest, when Pat and Darlene walked in, the question was, okay, now who's going to get second? Okay. Who's going to get second? So, and Darlene only died a few years ago, and Pat also. But they were great aerialists. They weren't great dancers. They did only basic moves in between, connections between the aerials. So by swing standards, they were great aerialists. They danced they danced in movies, a lot of movies, danced on the Al Jarvis show, television, so it showed their type of dancing to thousands and thousands of kids. So they were very influential in getting people into West Coast swing.
One question in between. What can you tell us about movies and West Coast swing?
Movies. There were so many wonderful people. One of the persons that I remember the most in the movies, my all-time favorite dancer, Jean Veloz. She's alive today. She's still as beautiful as ever. And she's still an amazing dancer. She's in her 90s. I just saw her last year at one of the events. And she is poetry in motion. There was a very famous scene in a movie where there's a young girl thrown into a big jam circle, and she's first dancing with a sailor and then a marine, and then it goes back and forth, and she's trying to choose between one or the other. That is Jean Veloz. Anyone that's ever seen that old-time movie clip, and I know a lot of people have, that's her, and she's fabulous. One of that was in the 40s, I believe. In the 50s, the movies that were very influential, the dancers that I liked in the movies, was Gil Brady and his wife Nikki. She died, but Gil's still alive, and I believe he's living in Vegas now. And you always knew him because he had a different style, but he called it West Coast, and very big black glasses. And he would hop like a flea, you know, and his feet were just going like this all the time, like very fast boogie-woogie. But he called it West Coast swing. So a lot of the West Coast swing dancers danced in the movies. You know, in the background, when the Jerry Lewis movies, they had a lot of them dancing in the background. Gil Brady danced, I remember, in Houseboat with Sophia Loren and Cary Grant. So a lot of good dancers were background.
Okay. Are there also some movies today's showing?
There are commercials today. As a matter of fact, Tessa and Miles, who just performed and did a show at the convention here, Swing, I don't pronounce it right, Swingterland.
No, swing, no, doesn't.
But they're top West Coast swing champions in a showcase, and they I still see it on television. It's a national commercial where you see a little bit of West Coast swing.
Okay. Who and where did people influence the scene most?
The current West Coast swing scene that is worldwide has been influenced, in my opinion, the most by Buddy Schwimmer.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy Schwimmer, without a doubt, has not only been a great dancer in his youth, but he came from a family of dancers.
Mm-hmm.
His parents were the only ones ever invited to perform at the Savoy in Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
The only white persons
Mm-hmm.
that were considered to be good enough
Mm-hmm.
to dance
Mm-hmm.
with the Afro-Americans
Mm-hmm.
that were dancing at the Savoy
Mm-hmm.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Buddy was seen by Skippy Blair
Mm-hmm.
when he was young,
Mm-hmm.
and she saw the talent, the raw talent that
Mhm.
this man had
Mm-hmm.
and his ability. Buddy told me this story.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that Skippy came to him and said, "Hey, come to my studio,
Mhm.
come work for me,
Mhm.
and I will teach you
Mhm.
the basics and how to break down everything that you're doing."
Mhm.
And so he attributes the ability to break everything down into specifics
Mhm.
to Skippy Blair.
Mhm.
And Skippy is a wonderful person, still alive, who has contributed so much to West Coast Swing. So if you take Skippy Blair and Buddy Schwimmer, you will see where we are today. They have moved with the future. They are not stuck in the past.
Mhm.
They've taken into consideration the changes in music. They've taken into consideration the changes in body style that needs to be done for the music. You have one body style for waltz, right?
Mhm.
But would you be doing boogie woogie to waltz?
Mhm. No.
Right. So they recognize that as the music changes, the body should change to interpret that music. So they're young in their thinking and still current, even though they've been around for quite some time. We just had Skippy's 90th birthday last year, I think it was.
Mhm. Okay. What about other famous names?
Oh, there have been so many wonderful dancers. Charlotte Bott, she has influenced so many women. Mario Rabau was copied by so many men. I mean, he was superstar #1 in the 80s. So many wonderful dancers. I remember when Benji Schwimmer and Heidi, his cousin, were in young adult, and Jordan, it was his first year with Tatiana in young adult, and Benji took second, Heidi, and Jordan and Tot took first. That was both of their last years in young adult. Then, when they went into adult, Benji went into showcase, and Jordan and Tot went into classic, and each of them won. It was wonderful. It was so exciting. They both performed fabulous. So they have been wonderful dancers. There have been a lot of European dancers coming in recently that I really like. You wanted to ask me about partners that I've had? For the U.S. Open, I have danced with, I had to write them down. I danced with Jim Jackson, Mike Daniele, John Woodruff, Dennis Crawford, Darren Gates, and Mikey Pedrosa. So I've danced with a lot of different people at the U.S. Open. But as far as dancing forever, I have danced with so many I can't count. But I can tell you who my very first partner was in a dance. And it was American Tango when I was a preteen.
Okay. Good. Can you tell us some funny stories?
Yes, I will tell you a funny story on myself.
Mm-hmm.
They always tell you, be prepared, try to make sure things don't happen. I mean, I've lost shoes in the dance and you keep going. I've seen people have wardrobe malfunctions and things, but probably the two funniest stories I've heard about malfunctions during a performance contest. Mm-hmm. One was a show in Vegas, mm-hmm. and one was in a competition. Mm-hmm. And the competition was with George Christopherson and Frida Angela, mm-hmm. who were very early. They were in the movies, they were tops in competition, and George had a toupee, mm-hmm. as he got older. Mm-hmm. And he would still perform, still go into competitions and mm-hmm. things. As I'm saying, the scene was different in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And he lost his toupee right in the middle of the performance. You know? But he kept dancing and he maneuvered over and grabbed it and tried to put it back on his head and everything. And the crowd went crazy. So of course he won. You know, so he was a performer. Okay. And then the other one was Pat Agers, the Pat and Darlene, the great aerialists in West Coast Swing. Mm-hmm. And they were doing a show in Vegas, and Pat had false teeth, mm-hmm. and they fell out during a show.
Okay.
And they went sliding across the floor. So that may have been where the bug routine started, because it was Pat and Darlene that started the bug routine. But she started to do something to entertain while Pat went running after his teeth. And, you know, she did with the bug. Okay. But I think that's where the bug routine first started. It was because of a funny, well, maybe not so funny, but anyway, it happened. And myself, I remember I was in junior high school, and we were having a dance, and there was a contest, a swing contest. And of course I wanted to dance, so I grabbed me a partner. And we had full skirts and full petticoats, and I had these real pretty pink petticoats that I just loved. And I'm twirling around, and the elastic in the waist broke, and my petticoat fell to the floor.
Okay.
So I'm looking at my petticoat, and I just step out of it, grab my partner again, and we kept going.
Okay, fine. Can you tell us something about the history of West Coast Swing? Maybe you told to some contemporary witnesses, and they told you how it did start.
It started with Dean Collins. Dean Collins, I was told that Dean Collins was the one that came up with the name West Coast Swing. I've also been told it was Skippy Blair. I don't know. But I do know that Dean Collins was the one that started the Los Angeles West Coast Swing Dance Club, and which is still in existence today. I dance there on the first, third, and fifth Sundays of the month. But he started it with a group of what are called charter members. They were the first members. It was a group of 10 or 15 people. One of the guys was Jack Hayes, the first one who introduced me to it. And they started dance, and then they had a fight, I say a fight, disagreement with some other dancers, And Kenny Wetzel took the name the Rebels Club, and he had competing dances at a different location for West Coast Swing. And up until Kenny died, he would run Friday night dances, West Coast Swing, at a little place called the Press Box. The Press Box is the bar in the bowling alley and in Westminster, California, Orange County. And it used to be, the bar used to be called the King's Table, and West Coast dancers danced there. I danced there at King's Table. And but even to this day, it's still West Coast Swing on Friday night at the Press Box. So anyone that would want to go to a history place, they should go to the Press Box on Friday night, because that's the place where the whole 80s revolution and superstars used to dance. Mary Ann Nunez, Lance Sherman, Charlotte and Wayne Bob, all of the people in Southern California, and even when Northern California would come down, everyone wanted to go to the Press Box. That was the place to go. The first hour and a half would be more contemporary music to what the old-timers liked. Kenny could read the crowd. He was very good at reading the crowd for the music. And then later in the evening, between 9:30 and 10, the young, newer generation of Westies would come in, and he'd change the music for them. So from 8 until 9:30 or 10, you had old-time West Coast music. From 9:30 to 10, you had the new contemporary.
Okay. What kind of music you call old style and new style?
Music of old style I call blues, big band, stuff like Begin the Beguine.
Shack.
Jack Carey?
No, shack style music.
Czech?
No, more swing music that have different styles. Blues is only one.
When I think of blues and swing, I think of music that's probably what they were dancing to. What Kenny would play would be music from 50s, 60s, some 70s. Green Onions is a good example of the kind of music that he would play. That type of music, not the new rock of the 80s and 90s and 2000s. You know, the modern music of the kids change. I call that contemporary. Everything else I call, you know, more in the blues, rock and roll.
Okay, good. And last, more private question. You told me you think that West Coast Swing is one of the most difficult dances,
yes,
especially for leaders. Can you explain a little bit more and have a look also to other dances to compare?
Other dances are more structured and have remained structured. Whether you're dealing with Latin or ballroom, those dances have structured requirements that you have to perform. Swing is freer. West Coast Swing is a freer dance. And it started out as a lead follow. It has become more than a lead follow. It's more difficult for the man, I believe, because he initially in West Coast Swing was responsible for whatever pattern they were doing, for stopping at any point, for watching for people on the floor, for keeping in a very narrow, tight slot that they all danced in, for keeping on time to the music, for hearing any changes. He was required to do everything. The girls just had to follow. Then the girls would start doing little footwork, syncopations, and as long as she didn't take the man off of what he was doing, she could not interfere with his leading. So it was still the man led everything. The girl could just do little things as long as she didn't. But today, if you look at today's West Coast swing, there is a more evenness between lead-follow. I'm seeing the man, of course, starting off doing the leading, but then I'm seeing the girl taking over. Sometimes it's called hijacking, and taking over and going into something. And then the man plays off for her and takes it again. Then she takes it back from him. So I think there is more of a give and take today between man and woman, leader and follower. But for the men, I think it is still very difficult to have all of that responsibility and still try to look good.
Do you have some tips and hints to go for starting learning West Coast swing, especially if you know already maybe some other dances, Latin or ballrooms or so?
Because other dances, they will work with quicks and slows and timings, 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you're working, knowing that swing is a 4/4 time dance, I believe that it's important to work a lot for yourself. Practice yourself. Take your basic moves of West Coast swing. Take your sugar push, side pass, underarm pass, whip. Take that. Work your steps and then change them. Change the timing. Instead of doing 1, 2, do and 1, 2. Instead of doing a triple of 3 and 4, do and 3, 4. Or 3 and 4 and. Play with the timing of the beginning, the middle, and the close of all the patterns that you know, and see how you can change them on your own, whether you're a man or a woman. The timing, play with the timing and the music on your own, practice that way. But rule number 1 is to have fun.
My private credo for West Coast swing is about variations.
About what?
About variations.
Variations? Yes. It is about variations. As I'm saying, you want to go 100 miles from here. You might want to go to the left and take the scenic route. Someone else might want to go to the south and go another way. Someone else. West Coast swing is the same way. You have an ultimate goal, a beginning and an end to the dance, a beginning to an end of the connection. You want to stay connected most of the time, very few breakaways, but keep the connection, and during this connection, playing off of each other within the limits of the music and the dance floor. So you can't do it with someone else if you can't do it yourself, right? So there's nothing wrong with taking the timing of the music, breaking it up in sections, and seeing how many different ways you can accent it.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.